Well, hello. Firstly, I want to say thank you very much for everybody for being here in person. It's really nice to have a black hat and see people who have legs. I'm sure many of you have realized over the last 18 months, we've lived virtually with nobody having a bottom half. So it's really cool. So massive thank you for everybody who turned up. As is traditionally at the end of Black Hat, we do a Locknote. Normally it's with Jeff. Unfortunately, Jeff's not here, so you've got to put up with me. But also fellow review board members. We have Meadow.
Hello, I'm Meadow. I do hardware security research.
And James.
Hey, I'm James. I do web security research mostly.
And Marina.
Hello, I'm Marina. I mostly do cyber-physical security research, also hardware. Currently very much interested in artificial intelligence security.
And finally, Thomas.
Thank you. Thomas, I'm control system security specialist.
Good. So what we wanted to do was, when we go through the review process, we feel very privileged because we get to see a lot of research that's happening. And one of the things we've noticed over the last 18 months of lockdown is how research has changed from a security perspective. And it was interesting for us to especially see how and what people got up to. We had the first lockdown where everybody became bakers and they did sourdough. And what we noticed is that when you give a large community such as us hackers lots of free time, stuff goes wrong pretty quickly, especially for software security and hardware security. But this got us thinking, so Marina did an amazing keynote about the need to secure more critical stuff. And I guess it started discussions about what actually is critical, right? Because if we think, ICS or stuff that controls water plants, yes. But as we've seen how easy it is to break into stuff, you could almost apply that to most days of the internet. So I guess based on that, I want to ask Meadow first. Based on some of the talks that you've seen and also some of the things we've reviewed, what would you say we are when it comes to a space of, are we making stuff better or is it still a pipe dream?
Okay, so I think we are trying to, obviously not hard enough. I focused myself going to the talks but first of all, I focused myself on going to the talks that I don't actually know the topics about, because that's how I learn. I don't want to sit in my rabbit hole. But also, I really liked the last keynote, yesterday's keynote, closing keynote from Kevin and Regis' talk, who's probably still here somewhere on the audience, about how we should learn and approach knowledge. Because because I do hardware day to day, but I also focus on people and how people are the most important part in this whole security environment. And what Kevin said yesterday really resonated well with me when he said that, paraphrasing, that we users should be able to do whatever we want, and it's our job to secure this, right? When users click on a malicious link, right? It's not their fault because they're supposed to do this. I mean, maybe we should train them more. However, training them is also putting outsourcing security to the users, right?
I think it's shifting the onus, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, we should, if I go and buy a toaster tomorrow, I'm not expecting to kill myself when I plug it in. Why is it when it comes to software that we've gone, you're holding it wrong, right? But it's insecure, you're holding it wrong.
Yeah, so I'm noticing this more and more, this shift into looking at people more and putting people first, not only on the user side, but also on the security team side, right? We are the most important part of this chain of security, right? The technology can wait, the technology can always be improved. However, we are the most important. We have to focus more on ourselves.
Agreed. Thomas, I'd love to get your thoughts. Are we, you come from academia, right? So you see another side of it. Are we seeing big shifts in what, say, students and academia is doing from a security, or are we still trying to get there?
Something really good research, of course, submitted to Black Hat. Are we getting there? In certain areas, yes, but every time when I come to Black Hat, I see there's more things actually to do. So, because you referred to the keynote from yesterday, with my control system background, I couldn't believe, I think Marie said that the operators of the colonial pipeline would eventually be able to tax deduct their ransom payment. Yeah? And if I hear something like this, then more from a political side, obviously there's more things to be done, because this would mean that we are actually incentivizing critical infrastructure operators not to do their security homework. If on the other side, I look at aspects that Meadow touched a little bit already on the human factor in Kevin's Locknote, I think this is a completely new angle. So this was eye-opening, for instance, for me to hear 2 different talks which were human-centric, putting sort of the human factor not as a negative side, but as a positive side. So to change the way we look at security and in general at our systems, to make humans better responsive to the actual tasks that they have to do. And the other thing also was, there was a really good talk on CSIRT team performance and the human factor in that as well. That brought up 2 things that reminded me of my own earlier career days, that in cybersecurity you usually have either the superhero problem, which means everything depends on that one single person that has all the knowledge and that holds everything together, or that we have maybe the firefighting problem, that we're constantly fighting, but we don't have the time to actually step back and think about what should we change in our systems so we can actually improve security. So that's why I'm saying, yeah, we're making progress in some areas, but still a long way to go.
Yeah, I'm really glad you touched on ransomware, especially ransomware itself. Jeff talked about how ransomware has somehow created a cottage industry. And it's kind of sat with me for 2 days now, because it's alarming. I think, it's all well and good to glamorize the offensive capability. But with ransomware, it's kind of shown how badly we've done it. And the fact that we now have a cottage industry spun up, where we have ransom brokers, there was a great talk earlier. We have products that fix ransomware. We have everything growing up at ransomware. My worry is that we are facilitating crime to some degree, because the one can't live without the other, right? Ransomware groups know that right now you can make a lot of money from ransomware, and that's the sad state of affairs. And the fact that you've got ransomware brokers almost means that that company has kind of accepted the fact that they will be paying the ransom. So I guess my question, Marina, is this a healthy position for us to be in, or are we just not fueling the fire?
Yeah, so I'm kind of struggling with this economy because absolutely, yeah, we're creating more and more precedents. And the problem is also that the attacker understood, they figured out the industries, especially those who has really very critical need for uptime, or basically very critical time for quick recovery. And especially because there is no culture of how do we communicate that, well, we have an outage because, well, we are one of those victims, since we still do not have culture of communicating it to the customers. And for example, I do a lot of consultancy work where I do on a customer project and we have to stop because the customer is down and they pay immediately. And sometimes even for example, if it is a unit which is within the large organization, they would not even report it neither to SOC nor to CSIR nor somewhere else. So it's just basically, they don't want even to admit within even own company, because the consequences for you, if you're responsible for that unit, they are unclear. So so we try to recover very quickly because we don't know how to communicate to the customer, so we need to recover. And then we think later on how do we, what Thomas just says, fighting the fires, and then later on we think about that, what do we do with it later on. But the problem is also, of course, if you do not inform your, let's say, maybe even colleagues or anything, that you will never even get the budget to fix what was the problem in the first instance. So, of course, from multiple perspectives, right now we are creating fantastic, it's a very rich soil for this economy, criminal economy, to exist. And until we fix it, basically if we are not doing enough research in how to counterfight ransomware, how to quicker find the remedy and so on. We are not investing enough. For some reason, we invest in enough time how to negotiate about ransomware. We have a talk today about that. That's should be strategy you can reduce from 20 million to 1 million. But is it an effort which we need to invest? So that is something maybe I'm at this point, I don't understand like why we go in that path.
Yeah, it's almost like we have that, you know, age-old saying, crime doesn't pay. It's awkward because right now crime really does pay. And it irks me to say that because, you know, the fact that we have ransomware negotiators, you know, it's almost like an old Italian mob film where you now have that as a LinkedIn endorsement. Yeah, I ransomware negotiate now. Criminals are going, this is the easiest money in the world, right? And you're right. I think as a research industry, we should be kind of making it much harder for the criminal groups that do it. But it's clear we're not. On that note, obviously we've seen lots of amazing research. And like I said at the start, when we do reviews, a lot of people don't realize like how passionate the review board members are about doing reviews. We'll spend many, many hours doing it. We have arguments like families have arguments. It's pretty cool where we respect each other's opinions, but sometimes it's like, you're just talking rubbish. That's an amazing talk, but it's really healthy. So I wanted to push it over to James. Like, what are some of the really cool things that's popped out in this Black Hat EU and why have you got so excited?
We've seen some pretty interesting trends. One of them that came up with a bunch of different talks is, you know, systems are rising in complexity, and one way that people are dealing with that is they're splitting their systems into multiple separate components. And, you know, maybe they're also saying, well, actually, we'll take this one component and the cloud side can take care of that, and we don't need to worry about it. And it's partly used as a kind of way to escape from the vulnerability. But because you've got different systems all processing the same data in slightly different ways, we're seeing massive spikes in new types of vulnerability that just happen in discrepancies between the different systems. Mm-hmm. And it's creating this kind of mess because on the one hand, we're getting really into white box analysis and code analysis and that kind of stuff. And then we're creating all these issues where it's like your front end is a cloud service. It's a black box. You can't get the code for it. And as we saw from the Chaos DB talk, you can't trust the cloud guys to actually do a decent job either. So we're making these vulnerabilities that are incredibly hard to find, and you have to use black box techniques, but then often you don't know how to find them. So we saw this with the HTTP header smuggling talk, where the attack technique is relatively obvious and has been widely documented previously, but no one was actually finding that vulnerability because no one knew how to reliably find it. And so we have this talk where someone's come up with a very clever black box strategy to find this vulnerability that everyone knew existed, but no one really knew where it was, and then just used it to hack a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, you touched on a really good point, right? So I think what we're seeing with the complexity, I mean, like first credit to the Wiz team, I don't know if they're here, but like that chaos vulnerability, it was a WTF moment for Microsoft. I genuinely don't know how and why that happened. And the impact could have been massive because again, you know, the cloud is a shared responsibility model. We wrongly assume, and everybody knows the problem of assuming is that you know what you're doing. And we saw with the Chaos DB, just that wasn't the case. But I think, you know, especially with your research that you've been doing with HTTP2, which is not new anymore. Like it's been around for a very long time. It was speedy and so on. We're now starting to see that almost enlightenment where people are going, right, we knew that this existed, but it was really hard to exploit. And now, as you've shown, and I forgot the research name with the header one, like it's becoming devastating because we're just throwing so much together and hoping it all works when, as you said, the complexity is really, really hard. And I think that's where we're going to see a lot more trends happening in the future where I think the pwnage is going to get worse, if I'm brutally honest, because I think the complexity is going to hurt us in the end.
That's it, yeah. It's broken. We know it's broken. We even know how it's broken, but finding it and proving it is what people are researching right now. And there's a bunch of valuable things there that we just don't know yet. Yeah,
I mean, so if anybody's a bug bounty hunter here and you want some tips, grab James's talk and the other talk. You will make a fortune, all right? Guaranteed, because a lot of people are going to have this bug moving forward.
Speaking about future development of web, because H2 is something that has been with us for quite a time, but still not widely adopted, right? And the same thing, much older, is IPv6.
it's never going to get adopted. Like, forget it now.
I know,
Like,
I know.
It's why we don't need it.
However, it may at some point, right? Because we are seasoned, so we remember that this talk about, oh, it's just around the corner, around the corner, right? And we had some talks on the virtual tracks, which I, as a review board member, I was actually pushing, because we need to bring more attention to it, right? Because at some point it's going to happen. And honestly, many mobile providers, for example, in the UK, they give you an IPv6, native IPv6 address, right? And we are sort of, because we got used to this fact that IPv6, oh, okay, it's going to happen someday. Right? But one day we're going to wake up, and it's going to be here, or actually is here, but we are not doing enough research. That's why I was trying to push for those 1 or 2 talks that actually are bringing more attention to IPv6. Same with H2, right? Because this is something that is going to happen at some point.
Yeah, I think so. The under-researched part is fascinating. I'm going to look at Marina here. Marina did an amazing bit of research with Rick. Basically, building a C2 for PLC using 2 bytes. I'm like, damn, okay, imposter syndrome level 9. What was quite cool about it is that we've known for a very long time that ICS is not the most secure in the world. Everybody is quite okay with that. But I think one of the reasons is that it's really hard to build your own ICS lab at home. All right? So again, not many people have done it, and the research is lacking. And we're seeing this with a lot of the themes. I mean, Marina, you love driving ships and breaking ships. Why? Why is it so hard to get into that world?
I think, so I think you will, of course, always see that this is another trend that, like we see a lot more security in cloud because more and more people getting skills, because cloud are novel, let's say, systems with novel terminology, becoming, let's say, experienced, and it takes time. And we really see the trends as like cloud security. The technology has been there for a long time, but the research, because the people understood the systems enough to do the novel research, is just picking up. And with ICS, the reason why we are still not picking up to the level where we should be is because this is a so complex system with no consistency or heterogeneity. And Thomas worked previously with Siemens, so he knows that there is documentation for every small functionality in that PLC, which is 500 pages long, and it's very, very complex. So you just need to invest a lot of time to get there. And people approach me, you can buy PLC, you can buy a lot of software, but you really need to be ready to invest a lot of time and be a lot of frustrated. People ask, like, teach me, like, how to do that. That's not cross-site scripting, like which you explained, and you can go and start practicing on the web pages. It's literally years of practice until you have enough knowledge. And this is why, for example, the research which we've done, we had so I took an angle of cyber-physical attacker because I knew I was looking at that attack surface with attacker perspective, but I wouldn't be able to conduct it without an experienced guy who knows PLCs very well, because then I say, hey, can you do this? I didn't need to return that, because it just takes a lot of time. So, and this is why certain attack surfaces, even though the system's been there for a very long time, they appear much later. And this is what probably another which trend we see maybe similar, is that fuzzing is a known technique. It's been used forever. But in the past, couple of years, we start seeing that fuzzing is being used professionally. We start being able to really use them in a useful way. And again, why we're still not seeing enough, and why industry is still using stupid unit tests and whatnot, but not fuzzing, because industry could be fuzzing as well. But setting up fuzzers and becoming proficient in them and being experienced is at a learning curve which you should be willing to invest into. But of course we see really this is already picking up. And one of the things which I actually was absolutely amazed this year is that we had a talk where we've been fuzzing and machine learning frameworks in the context of machine learning. So we even already moved there. So so certain topics, they are rare, they're very needed, and certain attack surfaces are not discovered yet, just because people did not invest time to learn in certain technologies, because it takes time to learn them.
I'm gonna come back to the fuzzing one, because you raised a really good point, but I'm gonna speak to the professor in the corner. All right, so if it takes a long time to learn, we almost need some kind of mechanism where people go to learn things, right? Going back to Maria's thing, we need to secure what we're using. We're using more and more digital lives than ever before. And I think COVID advanced a lot of things in our human lives, right? Because nobody uses cash anymore, except to do illegal activities. We don't do a lot of other things that we used to do before COVID, right? So why hasn't academia taken that flag and said, you know what, we will do an ICS security degree? Or maybe there is one.
Actually, there is one. There is one at my university, for instance. Academia has picked up. You know, I guess this really has a little bit to do that, like, formerly I would say the knowledge areas were separated. There were classic engineers and there were cybersecurity guys, and so even in my old position when I was still at Siemens, it took Stuxnet and me becoming the incident handler of Stuxnet to really bridge that gap, to really bridge that domain. The tricky part here again is complexity. You could, of course, teach control system security in principle, or control systems industrial automation in principle in cybersecurity, but actually to pull something off what Marina Enrique presented. This is very much specific for a specific technology, or requires very deep understanding of how those systems are engineered and used. So other than like the average IT environment, pretty much every control system on this planet is uniquely engineered. You won't find any duplicate. So that requires, as Marina said, years and years of understanding. Now, I accept the challenge, of course, saying, okay, why don't you guys take this back and see whether you could use virtualization, you could use whatever is already out there to bridge the skill gap as early as possible, and actually have more people come up and go into the really detailed control system technology depths.
It'd be useful. I mean, so on that fuzzing front, you know, so we've seen a lot of talks this year, and we do get a lot of fuzzing talks, and it's really good. We've seen talks that implemented fuzzing to find a lot of ODAs. Now, the Google Titan M one, which it was a great talk. I really enjoyed that, because here you have a traditional black box chip that Google's not released anything about, and they did amazing micro soldering. If you haven't seen the talk, do it on catch up. But they also fuzzed this secure chip, and within seconds they found out that there was a buffer overflow. Now, you'd automatically think that, man, Google knows how to not do buffer overflows, right? They've already publicly talked about their amazing fuzzing harness and frameworks and everything else. But fuzzing is really damn powerful. But I guess we just don't see it in the industry. Maybe it can open up to one of the questions later. How many people here in their organization embrace fuzzing to find bugs in their code bases? Right, the next section that I like the most. So, I know it's really biased, but top talks and why? Meadow.
I mentioned before the talk from Brad. I mean, I really liked it mostly because not only because of the content, but because we are starting to welcome talks that are human, but they also affect security. But I talked about this before, so my technical talk was the DDS one.
That was a good talk. It was very good.
That was, I mean, because I'm a nerd, deep in heart, I'm a nerd, and I was watching this talk, and I was like, well, first of all, I don't know much about DDS, and that was my imposter syndrome moment. I should know about this. Yep. I don't know about this. Why don't I know about this? So this is what I'm taking home today to actually have to learn something more about it, but also the talk itself. The way it was presented, the research that was presented, that was absolutely great. So if you haven't seen it, play it on catch up, because it's really worth it.
Yeah, good. I mean, I was like Meadow. I didn't appreciate where DDS was used. I'd never heard of it before. It's everywhere. If you want to own a robotic arm, you'll probably find DDS. And like most protocols from that era, security has always been something that wasn't really thought about. As Federico found out, a few vendors refused to even acknowledge the vulnerabilities because their product was secure, which is great. But also, again, fuzzing. Like and you know, when you looked at the protocol, it had two words that the industry has never really loved, XML and deserialization, because we've nailed that as a problem, right? That's an easy fix. But yeah, James, your top ones.
Yeah, I mentioned the head of smuggling talk, obviously, but another one that raised some interesting questions was the talk on exploiting a vulnerability in CSP in WebKit, and those researchers found a pretty serious vulnerability in WebKit that meant that you could use WebKit to hack basically every website that had a single sign-on system, and they reported it to Apple, and they were like, no, not a vulnerability, and they argued with Apple for months and months and got nowhere, and then went round all of these websites that were using single sign-on, which is, most websites, and just got bug bounties from them one by one and made over 100K from this vulnerability in Apple's browser. And this is an emerging and reoccurring theme of you've got one party has a serious vulnerability but refuses to take responsibility for it, and then some random kind of semi-related entity ends up dealing with it, and eventually with some pressure from the companies that got bug bountified. I think Apple did fix it in the end, but these chains of responsibility are completely broken and sometimes circular.
And it goes back to the Marietta's keynote. Like, who should be securing this, right? In true fashion, you're holding it wrong. It's not an issue, but actually it is an issue, and it impacts a lot of people. And I think that separation of who's actually responsible is still a big issue that we've got. And the responsible disclosure debate will go on forever because it's just something that we aren't very good at, if I'm honest. Marina.
Yeah, so it's probably maybe not good, it seems, to like the talk of another review board member, but I will go also with DDS, and the reason for that is that being in this industry for over the decade and literally studying to death anything what exists there, every component, to find these elements of microelectronics, to my shame, I've never heard about it. Yeah. Like, how is it even possible? And that is the fact that he discovered it, that he knows about that, the amount of research which went in there is just incredible. The impact is just absolutely incredible. And I'm just even left wondering how much is there left. So absolutely that one as well. Even though there is really, each time when we had so many submissions and you can select only this many, and when we send rejections to good talks, it's just like always, my heart is bleeding. But maybe another talk which I wanted picked up because it's maybe close also to what I'm doing and what I've been also wanted to do for ICS. There've been a talk that we need to separate or kind of maybe unique vulnerability database for clouds, because majority of the issues is what James is saying, is just like some complexities. It's not CVSS, but it's an issue which exists. And it's just like you kind of say, I sign it in CVSS, and maybe at some point it will be fixed. But you need to make it aware, you need to describe, you need to explain the impact, because it's not like vulnerability which is easily understood what is the impact. And because in ICS we also, for example, the issues which I was presenting, we also frequently discover a lot of similar issues, and they are not receiving neither CVSS, customers will not be notified. So you can't even secure the assets because you don't understand or not informed about the attack surface, or maybe unique configuration parameters. Just don't do this, because then it's a problem. Because again, so control systems also complex like cloud, it's with a lot of interdependencies. So I think it was really very well argumented talk, which I follow. And I think it's really needed. So that, was another of my favorite.
You get a good idea. We've got a lot of newcomers in the industry, and it's really great. And I think when you go into the industry and you think, wow, there's so much you need to learn and try and break. As we've seen here, some fairly seasoned, as you call us, researchers have never heard of DD6 before. And from what Federico was saying, this is ripe to play. It was about a year ago when the sudo bug was found. I mean, we've all used sudo for a long time. There's this misconception that because it's old, eyes have looked at that code like mad. And I can tell you now, they haven't. So if you're new to bug bounties, researching, fuzzing, pick some random old technology, tear it apart. You will probably find bugs, because I think there's a misconception that it's fine, it's been done before, it's safe. It's not QMail, right? Move on. I think we can find some really good bugs that way. Thomas.
So for me, I guess it's actually two groups. The first group was really on the psychological aspects, like how do we actually design our systems better to work, to be compatible with us humans, especially the humans doing security work. Also, a little bit making sure that we don't lose the sparse human resources that we have. So people going into burnout or just like get out of the security industry. So that's one important angle. And on the technical side, I would say it have been those talks which reminded me that sometimes we take a lot of technology foundation for granted to be working, to be reliable. Like I think we had at least 2 talks on Active Directory security and pounding that, certificate services and how to abuse that. Like everything depends on certificates these days. And finally, today's keynote from Adam Laurie, time synchronization. I mean, what if time is not working anymore? So this was really, really remarkable. Sometimes we need to, as you say, even look at the old stuff, take a close look at it. Don't take it for granted that it's just there and therefore it must be secure.
Yeah, definitely wise. All right, we've got a few minutes left. As is customary, I think we're going to look at what is the stuff that's going to impact us over the next year. Because, why not? It's like those top 100 lists. James?
I think broadly more vulnerabilities coming from multiple separate systems talking to each other, basically. I did say that last year, but it did come true. So I'm going to stick with it.
Just stick with that one. All right, fine. Marina?
I think we will be finding more and more, like for example, like what I also wanted to talk about this Active Directories, because now we start integrating together with cloud. Cloud gets Active Directory, and suddenly we have more impact. Suddenly there is again more interest in the Active Directory. And all of this integration of the ecosystem, the more complexities is getting, we will start discovering like more and more. And what we are seeing in the I'm really curious to see this, how it will be developing, because in the past years, we are no longer finding one, like research, which I found one vulnerability. It's always a gigantic, large impact. It's something very complex with very large impact. So how is it going to develop further? I'm really curious about that.
Can we just say, if we find big bugs, can we stop with the logos and the fancy names, please?
And songs.
And songs. Let's just go back to old school bugs. Thomas.
So I think we're going to see different to the, let's say, the low-hanging fruit type ransomware attacks that we have these days, adversaries which make use of the more advanced features in specific protocol stacks. So this is like a natural fear. There's just plenty of control systems, like from my domain, on the public internet. There would be, let's say, more interesting ways of creating ransomware than what is done today. Let me just stop at that point. Eventually, we're going to see that. The question is, looking at those technologies, like Federico and Marina also referred to, what are our options at this point to actually secure that from a research point of view, build security around that before the other side takes advantage of it?
Yeah, so I think what's interesting for me, the colonial attack was almost a moment, because I think a lot of attackers always thought, well, sure, you could gain control to, say, ICS systems, but would you want to actually cause damage? And I think what I gathered from chatting to you and seeing Marina's talk, and it's like almost that mindset of we can actually do damage now, right? You can stop fuel being delivered. You can change how some people live. And that's my worry, is that people are going to get very brave. A bit like we saw with the Bangladeshi bank hack with Lazarus. Prior to that, trying to attack a bank that way was not so common, but that almost gave a lot of confidence to attackers to go, wow, you could actually do it and make sure the printer doesn't run out of paper. So I think that's the worry. We're in that space now where somebody could blow something up for ransom. Meadow.
I did see a research, I think it was from Forrester, a few days back, and I tweeted about it. And I usually don't pay much attention to predictions. However, what they said actually hit me hard in a way, maybe a bit even personal, because they said, they predict that next year, 10% of information security people will quit their jobs and go to the mountains and herd sheep. And I think this is becoming a problem because we are talking about technology. We are talking about how we need to do more, we need to work more, but we are sort of not working people. Because we may end up in a situation when there's no one to work those problems. And that's going to be a really big problem. So apart from obviously we have to learn, we have to improve, we have to be a step ahead from criminals, we also have to care more about ourselves and our employees.
Agreed. I'm not going to go to the mountains. I've decided I'm going to become an NFT monkey millionaire from selling lots of money to somebody doing money laundering for NFTs, because that's kind of the only thing they're used for, right? On that one, we've got about 4 minutes for questions. We would love to hear from anybody. There are 2 mics at the back, so by all means, has anybody got any questions? If you want to go to the mic, that would be helpful, because then it can go with the stream. Thanks.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
So you discussed the human factor, making humans better responsive to tasks or attacks. How would you go about doing this? So looking at that human layer.
Ma'am.
That probably, having 3.5 minutes is probably not enough. I mean, the problem with answering this question is that we've been trying to do this for a very long time and still haven't found a way. I am trying to highlight that the problem exists and we have to take care about it more and more. However, up to this point, we haven't found a way, apart from doing training, from doing awareness, from doing various courses and this kind of stuff that we are quite used to. How do we actually try to fix the problem? Because maybe we are focusing on a different problem. We weren't focusing on people enough, but just to tick boxes on training and satisfy compliance requirements, for example, right? So I cannot answer this because smarter people than me haven't found a proper way, but it may be, as I said, maybe because we weren't focusing on the right problem up to this point, or maybe we're just starting to focus on the right problem.
Yeah, I want to add to that. I definitely agree it's the focus problem. So back in the day when we did the whole SDLC thing, where we as an industry, and I'll put my hand up, I did this, it's awful, we blamed developers for writing insecure code. And there was almost like a pitchfork initiative where, oh, that stupid dev doesn't know how to do secure code. When in reality, the problem was us. We weren't building stuff that gave them the guardrails to write code where we detected the problems, right? Because developers develop and security people should security people, right? So I think there's a shift of where we're seeing the problem. And Meadow touched upon it at the start. People should be able to click stuff. And I think the problem is by us blaming them for clicking on stuff, well, when I go to a tap and open a tap, water comes out. That's what it's supposed to do. So I think, you know, there's a slight shift in where the problem's at, but I agree, I don't think it's been solved yet.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? Oh, there's one there.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm just curious from some of the takeaways from today's Locknote. Why do you think attackers should stop with the low-hanging fruit of ransomware when they're making more and more with every successive ransom payment? I think recently we've had a lot of tech companies hit with some of the highest ransom payments ever, like 50 million or something thereabouts. So we're not solving a lot of the simpler problems with cybersecurity as well. Like, you know, a lot of ransomware, you know, the problems on the system technically are not particularly sophisticated. So how do you think that can be communicated better to decision makers?
Thomas, that was your one, I think.
Yes, sir. To make that more precise, so I think the question there was, so what are we going to see? I hope that like 3 to 5 years from now, we'll see criminals hopefully move away from those low-hanging fruits, because we hopefully were able to solve those, let's say, easy entry points somewhat quickly. And therefore, I think even as Jeff Moss put it, we are able to drive the costs for those intrusions for the attackers up, and that's why they have to use more advanced means, like in control systems, to actually pull their campaigns off. That was the original point.
How do you think that problem's going to be solved, though?
I hope so, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good, I mean, well, a perfect example. If you look at, say, Windows 10, right? If you do a red team against a fully patched, up-to-date Windows 10, you can't just be dropping, say, Mimikatz on it and hoping for the best. Like, it's very hard to not make noise these days. And I guess that's the thing, is if we get better at the baselines where it's really hard to not become noisy, hopefully we'll fix that. But yeah, time will tell.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. I think we're out of time. Again, thank you very much for everybody who turned up and for all the virtual listeners. It's very cool to see people again. And again, massive thanks to all the researchers and the speakers for doing amazing stuff. So thank you very much.